Hi everybody, welcome to Colorado Inside Out. I'm your host Dominic Dezzutti. Thank you for joining us. Let's get a quick take on the Denver Sheriff's Department announcing this week that it will join 6 other counties in refusing to hold inmates at its facilities brought in strictly on immigration status. Patty Cahoon from Westford, this made some pretty big headlines. What'd you make of it?
Well, it was a good idea. Here we have jails that we already know are overcrowded. We've got a lot. We're talking about building another Denver jail, which is crazy. If this is a federal violation, and the federal government isn't taking care of the immigration issue, let them take care of this.
David Kopel from DU Law School and the Independence Institute. I was wondering if the sheriffs do they have the legal backing to make a stand like this?
Without having studied it, and based on reading what's in the Denver Post, which I assume to be true unless till proven otherwise, their view was they have no legal choice. Actually, that it would be they don't have the legal authority to hold these people purely for federal immigration violations. So if I've got no reason to doubt the Post was accurate or that their attorneys were wise in describing the law.
Be interesting to see if it catches on because of that. Mike Litwin from ColoradoIndependent.com. What do you think of the events?
Well, I have no doubt this time to doubt David, who I'm sure is right. And it's just one more place where the federal institutions haven't come up with the right solutions, so the states are the ones that are getting burdened in immigration, immigration, marijuana, whatever. So yeah, I think it's exactly the right thing to do.
And Natasha Gardner, senior editor with 5280 Magazine, wrap it up for us.
I think it's important to note that it's not just Colorado that are sheriffs that are making these decisions. Other cities, San Francisco, LA, Chicago have also done a similar sort of reprieve. We're not going to implement this anymore. And it's important with where Colorado sits in the immigration debate that we continue to find quick responses and humane responses, and I think this was the right move.
Let's get to it. With only days left in the 2014 legislative session, the action is getting fast and furious. This week, a bill that would have outlawed red light cameras was killed in committee after metro area mayors asked lawmakers to rethink the idea. Meanwhile, the $23 billion state budget was passed without major incident. Patty, these are just a few of the many things flying back and forth at the state capitol. What are you making of these last few days of the session?
Well, some of the most controversial bills are still coming, and we've got until midnight on Wednesday for them to get through. There's a lot still going on with pot. The question of, can they pass some legislation regarding labeling of edibles? Can they come up with some kind of pot banking, which is something that just came up again yesterday, the kind of a variation on a credit union? That would be a smart one to do, and I think the labeling and the concentration of edibles are important. Can they agree on that before the end of the day Wednesday? Hard to know. The construction defect law that people had been talking about, something happening, it's just coming up again this week. That's going to be a hard-fought battle, and I'm guessing won't make it out by Wednesday, but it's too bad. We need some clarifying legislation there. We already have the Uber fight that made it to the governor's desk, and I'm assuming he'll sign it so that Uber and Lyft will be able to keep operating here in Colorado. But several other things have already gone by the wayside, like the exciting cantaloupe peach debate. They withdrew the peach bill for this year, so we will not have a new state fruit.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point. David, it seems, I mean, the 2013 legislative session for Governor Hickenlooper was somewhat of a nightmare. He had handed a lot of things that now he's going to be carrying with him through the 2014 election. It looks like so far, with only a few days left, he's escaped fairly cleanly for the 2014 session. Do you think there's still a possible issue out there that's going to be thrown into his desk that will give him problems?
No, the only thing that could be that extreme would be if he signed up for some fracking ban, and that's contrary to his own inclinations. That would probably be the one issue on which, in his entire term as governor, he'd ever have the nerve to really stand up to the majority in the legislature. But I think you're making a broader point, which is this legislative session feels like, say, 2009, when we had unified Democratic control of the House and the Senate and the governor's mansion. And then, of course, they advanced Democratic bills, but they did it in a reasonably moderate way, as opposed to just the wildness and excessiveness that marked the 2013 legislative session. And I would suspect that deep down there are some people, even on the Democratic side of the aisle, who would say, you know, those recalls, we were sorry to lose some seats, but they did have a good tempering effect in helping the moderates in the party behind the scenes stand up to the wildest and most extreme and sometimes dominant factions in the Democratic caucus. So it's nice to be back to a normal Colorado-style legislative session.
Mike, what do you see on the horizon for this final week, or a little less than a week for the session?
Well, look, I think this session, as you said, went exactly the way that the Democrats and Hickenlooper wanted it to. It's funny, the liberals are in control of both houses, and they decided not to do anything in this election year to get everything done last year, and this year sort of wait it out and try to get Hickenlooper and Udall reelected and try to hold their majorities. And you know, when the big issues are red light cameras, you know, when that becomes a major day after day issue in the newspapers and on TV, that's a huge victory for Hickenlooper. People argue about that all the time. Cantaloupes versus peaches. He's happy not to take a stand on that. That's one thing he could not take a stand very comfortably on. So, you know, the gun thing went away very early, and I love the end of the legislature because they had to cram all this stuff into very few minutes. It's always fun, but nothing is going to happen that's going to make anybody really unhappy this year.
Natasha, this finals week for legislature is always fun to watch. I was a little surprised that the red light camera bill dissolved so quickly, because it seemed to have a lot of support, bipartisan support, and kind of that populist support, and I think people really hate red light cameras. And then a letter shows up from some mayors in the city, including Mayor Michael Hancock, and poof, it just disappeared. It was gutted and then killed within a week. Did that surprise you, or is that just the way it works down there?
I think it's the way it works. I don't think it's surprising. I think that whenever the financial reality, however you want to think about it, comes into play, that'll make decisions pretty quick at the Capitol. I think what's interesting, and something that's come up a few times around this table already, is that in the last few legislative sessions, the end of the game has been very dramatic. You know, civil unions, we have questions about guns, and it's been really exciting sort of sports watching. And what we're doing now is everyone's holding their breath, just waiting for that clock to tick out. No one wants to make a big move in the next couple of weeks. They want to look at re-election season. They want to look at what happens next. Does that mean that we're going to have some serious issues that aren't dealt with, such as edibles and financing for pot dealerships, as Patty mentioned? Yes, those topics are probably going to be shoved under the rug.
Well, speaking of one of those big issues they are still talking about at the Capitol, a coalition of 60 organizations have come together again to form Coloradans for Responsible Reform, this time to object to at least 12 potential fracking bans on the 2014 ballot. Meanwhile, a group of oil and gas industry leaders are working with lawmakers in the last days of the session to try to arrive at a way to increase local control for communities. David, it seems to me that while there's lawmakers thinking about it and oil and gas industry leaders trying to come up with something at the legislature, this is just going to be a title fight in November. It's not going to be some sort of compromised peace talks at the Capitol. It's just going to be a knockdown, drag-out, national money versus national money. But maybe I'm naive. What do you think?
No, I think you're right, because you essentially have, on the one side, the core is fundamentalist religious extremists who want to completely outlaw what the other people are doing. And it's not just about, how far is the setback going to be? And yes, oil rigs are noisy. And you can have, if that's the issue of the regulation of how it gets done, of course you can have local variations, or you can have a statewide compromise and things like that. That's the kind of thing that can work out. But at base, this is a group of people who feel that the use of fossil fuels is fundamentally immoral. And their jihad against fracking is based on the accurate fear that as natural gas becomes more plentiful, this will make people use more natural gas, which would be good because it's less expensive and less polluting than alternatives such as coal. But it also is a fatal blow to the wind and solar welfare lobbies, which only exist because they get so much corporate welfare, and natural gas, clean and safe, destroys them. So you've got financial interests that have to destroy fracking, and you've got people who find they are as offended by fracking as Al-Qaeda is by the idea of people eating ham sandwiches, and it has to be wiped out entirely.
Now, Mike, I realize that David took a very middle-of-the-road approach and moderate feel to the issue, but what do you think about what's going on? Is there going to be a compromise before November, or is this just about, let's just get to the ballot?
Oh, I'm surprised that they waited till so late into the session to do something. It's definitely in the oil industry's to their advantage to have gotten something passed. While David thinks it's only wild-eyed fanatics, jihadists, and I forget, atheists and religious. Who else is in there? I forget.
Just the jihad.
Yeah, ham eaters.
Anti-ham.
That's
All
right.
right. Yeah. Whoever else was in there. I mean, this has to go to a vote. And it's not like they're just voting with the jihadists are voting. Everyone's voting. So unless a majority of people agree with this issue, then it won't pass. So I think that a lot of people are very unhappy with having wells in their backyards. So if the oil companies had been able to, and the Hickenloopers had been able to say, look, we understand that there are issues of local control, and if we could pull back slightly, we can get something done. I mean, it's interesting to see Jared Polis in the middle of this, who doesn't like to play well with others. He enjoys sticking it at somebody, sticking it at his own governor in his own party in a strange year. But I think he did the right thing in a way in forcing the issue. And again, I'm surprised that the Ref C coalition couldn't come up with something in time to get it passed through the legislature.
Natasha, it seems like the Coloradans for Responsible Reform are going for the fight. Like Mike said, they didn't worry about coming to some compromise. When Kelly Brough from the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, who's also leading Coloradans for Responsible Reform, we need some shorter names. When she came out and said, hey, they're ready to fight these potential fracking bans on the ballot. It wasn't about getting a special session together to all have a kumbaya moment. Are we just headed for the title bout and millions of dollars coming into Colorado for this fight?
Absolutely. There's so much money in the oil and gas industry, and people who want to fight it as well. This is an issue that really is going to set the tone for the development of fracking and various other oil and gas related projects throughout the country, and it is important. The thing that I'm concerned with is that obviously there is a lot of concern and conversation about this, and it's not just people on huge sides of the issue, really big beliefs about how they feel about it. More often when I talk to people about, say, fracking, there's confusion about what it is, and there's concern about what it's going to do both to our communities, also to our state, but also to, say, the development of, fuel efficient cars. So looking at all those issues, I think, is what the average voter is interested in discussing, and I don't see anything wrong with having that discussion. Isn't that what we do here?
You like to think so. Patty, wrap it up for us. Where do you think this is going to go?
Well, it would be nice if we were going to have a quiet, well-behaved discussion where everyone is sipping fracking fluid cocktails and chatting about what the real science is behind it. But right now, the sides are so polarized, and as Natasha says, there also are a lot of people in the middle who have no idea what the truth is. And this is going to be a fight on so many fronts. It's national, it's regional, it's statewide, but then you've got these little municipalities too, where the votes, as we see in Broomfield and some of the other places, can be very close. But it's pretty, they can be swung one way or the other. I think we might be headed for a record number of ballot measures in November, and an extraordinary number will deal with fracking.
I completely agree.
I should
David?
apologize for my comment about Al-Qaeda. These fundamentalists pursue their objectives only through peaceful means, so they're more like the moral majority or the Muslim Brotherhood and nonviolent.
I'm not sure how nonviolent the Muslim Brotherhood is.
Right, fracking food, cocktails, and ham sandwiches.
Exactly. Well, it's good. It's good to get the clarification. Well, speaking of another fight, Senators Mark Udall and Michael Bennett are disputing.
Neither are jihadists.
Exactly,
Yes,
or
okay.
with the Muslim Brotherhood, disputing with Northeast politicians and the U.S. Department of Housing and Development over federal funds needed to assist Colorado flood victims. HUD announced this week a $62.8 million federal aid package meant to help disaster victims. But HUD also suggested a, quote, national resiliency competition, which would split the money between Colorado and other states, including areas hit by Hurricane Sandy. Mike, the seemed that HUD was setting up the fight between, New Jersey and Colorado. We already had, Christie going off about the whole pot thing. Now we're fighting over federal funds. Are Bennett and Udall going to need some backup for this fight?
Well, we've come into the Hunger Games stage of federalism, right? We had the race to the top, and now we've got the race to clean up the bottom. It's pretty bizarre. And in the fight between Colorado and the Northeast, my guess is that when you've got the Obama administration and you've got Mark Udall in a very tough Senate race, that you will see Mark Udall come out on top in this competition to get the race to the Senate majority for the Democrats is what the real race will be. And interestingly, how this might affect the Senate race, it was Cory Gardner who was in the so-called hypocrisy caucus where the Northeast legislators were angry at those Colorado Republicans who voted for aid to Colorado but voted against some of the aid for Sandy. So I'm thinking that Udall may end up in better shape in this than it looks right now, and Gardner may be the one who's on the defensive.
Natasha, what do you think? I mean, this is kind of one of those national fights where this is why you send a local representative to go fight these fights for federal funds, especially when disasters happen. What do you think is going to happen?
Well, and to point out right away, no one wins here. These are people, everyone needs help. There's not enough funds to go around. So if you win for your constituents, that means somebody else lost out on money that they probably desperately needed as well. I think what's interesting is that, like this issue and any issue that Udall is involved in the coming months, it will become a campaign issue. If he missteps, Gardner's going to be right on top of it. If he wins, Udall's going to be using it in campaign videos. That's what they do. But what's interesting is that it's almost like a fill in the blank campaign. Like who these people are, their names don't almost matter, because the conversations and the topics that are important, environment, these are all things that we've heard before. Women, Affordable Health Care Act, minority voters. It's the same race that we've seen in Colorado again and again and again. What's going to decide it is the independents, but I do think that moments like this, funding like this to the state, is going to have a dramatic impact on what those voters do.
Patty, do you think that Colorado, and I guess, like Natasha said, it's kind of our victims versus other people's victims, but will there be some equality here, or does the Northeast hold an advantage because of it's New York and New Jersey? We're talking about a pretty powerful political area.
Well, and we have more disasters coming down the pike every minute. We have the horrible tornadoes down south. You've got the flooding in Florida. The needs are endless. I wish the federal government would spend less time coming up with their odd Hunger Games type competition and more time actually making sure that the aid is distributed in an equitable way. We all remember the horrible stories about, things that never got delivered at Katrina, how much they were paying for something. Why don't they focus on efficiency? In Colorado, we should get points for how efficiently the state was able to get roads back up. The state put its money to very good use, but I would like to see the feds do the same thing.
David, wrap it up for us.
Chris Christie's hug of Barack Obama days before the election, it now goes down in history as the most lucrative hug in the history of mankind. There's no money. The federal government is broke. It's all borrowed from China or inflated by printing the Federal Reserve, in effect printing more currency. There's enormous deficit. It's not like Barack Obama has this stash of gold buried in the White House and he's deciding which of the peasants to give it out to. It's funny money. The Congress has chosen to spend money on corporate welfare, on transfer payments, on Obamacare, on a military-industrial complex in 100 countries, and all these other things. There is no zero money, real money left for disaster relief. States should expect to be self-sufficient on this.
Hunger Games meets Monopoly. Denver International Airport officials disclosed updated expenses for the Hotel and Transit Center this week, indicating a 5% increase that will push the total cost to close to $600 million. Denver Auditor Dennis Gallagher called the growing cost of the project a significant budget risk. Natasha, DIA has been a focus for budget issues since the whole idea even came about. But I think this was the first time it came back in the news over a budget increase in the specific project. Is something at risk, or is this 5% to be expected?
I think anyone who's worked in construction projects expects increases like this. It's the type of thing that just happens. I mean, I grew up in a family where construction put food on the table, so I learned very early you don't swear at road construction, and you just understand that projects come in over budget and late. That being said, I do appreciate that Dennis Gallagher is shining a light on it and saying, hey, is this an appropriate increase? I don't know if 5% is appropriate, but I do appreciate that somebody is looking into whether this is appropriate. Originally, the project was slated more for a $500 million range. Now it's up to $600 million, with associated costs they're saying closer to $730 million. So we know DIA's improvements will be a boon to our economy. The question is how much and at what cost? And I think Dennis Gallagher is asking the right questions to make sure that stays within a reasonable amount.
Patty, the project out in DIA is going to affect a lot of things, whether it's the mass transit going out there or Mayor Hancock's potential airtropolis, what DIA can be and all the different development can be out there. Is this a significant roadblock?
No, I think it's a good move right now, though, that Gallagher is watching that the airport's budget has been creeping. We had the story in the Post last month about maintenance fees on the runways. Definitely there should be some more oversight. We know that the airlines will do their own oversight because they're always complaining that they're going to be charged more to pay for the airport. But we also want to be sure we don't lose any of those airlines just because they are what are keeping our prices down. So more eyes watching this are better. Let's just hope the project doesn't take as long to complete, doesn't go past its completion date as much as the original DIA did.
David, what do you think of the flags that Dennis Gallagher raised this week?
One more reason why he is the greatest auditor in the city of Denver's history. This project shouldn't exist. If it was economical to build a hotel at the airport and you could do that profitably, private companies would do that, where you could sell them the land for some price and then they'd put it up, and they would take care of the construction management and take all the risks of the costs going up or down or whatever. Most hotels in this state, and even in Denver, are built without corporate welfare. You don't need a public-private partnership, which is a way of shoveling the public's money into private hands to build hotels.
Mike, is this going to get a little bit more attention from Mayor Hancock because he knows if it goes well, the rest of his other plans out there will be a little smoother?
The airtropolis, which will never happen and no one needs and nobody cares about. No, I think that what we do care about is the health of the airport. It's an important part to the local economy, and that making investment in the airport, if you want to keep DIA as one of the top airports in the world, you're going to have to make investment in it, and you can't rely on Hilton and Hyatt and Marriott to make that work for you.
Maybe the state of Kansas could kick in, since it's kind of debatable where the airport is, but that's another thing.
It is.
Let's get to our favorite part of the show, Disgrace of the Week. Patty, start us off.
One of the weirdest stories of the week, it was in the Denver Post about the Halloween burglary call from the mayor's office to the Denver police. And 3 hours after whatever had been taken or hadn't been taken had occurred, and the police took a while to come, and all of a sudden we have a new policy on how dignitaries will be treated if they call 911. Good for Stephanie O'Malley, the new manager of safety, who was not on duty at manager of safety when this call came down, because they have now pulled that give dignitaries special privileges.
I was already working on a certain impression of whatever dignitary I possibly could if I really needed help fast. David, what do you think?
Well, besides the disgrace that a Channel 12 host isn't considered a dignitary in his own right, The revelations about the Benghazi cover-up, it's now clear that this whole thing about that anybody in Washington actually thought that that stupid video was the cause of the terrorist attack on the Benghazi compound. That was a lie right from the start, and President Obama and Secretary of State Clinton and National Security and UN Ambassador Samantha Powell all went out and lied knowingly, or they were spinning, maybe some were believing what the White House had told them, but it was a concocted fake story right from the start.
I thought it was Susan Rice.
Susan Rice, sorry.
Mike, what's
Samantha, she never lies. She is honest as the day is long. She's the one who called Hillary a monster, right?
well, there you go. Well, what's your disgrace of the week, Mike?
My disgrace of the week is Mary Fallin, governor of Oklahoma, who was so eager to overrule the Supreme Court of her own state to make sure she can get two executions in one day. We got a botched execution and torture, and I think we should be thankful that the indecisive governor, John Hickenlooper, decided not to play that game.
Natasha.
I'm going to cheat this week and start with kind of good news. Well, it is good news. The Rapids, the MLS team in Denver and in Colorado, actually has a shirt sponsor, which is great. But the disgrace is that for a very long time, even after they got a title, they didn't have one. They were one of only 2 teams in the league that didn't. So the cheat is that it is actually good news. The sad thing is it took so long.
Say something nice about somebody? Patty.
Good for Denver Parks and Recreation and the city for reconsidering what was looking like it was going to be that 3-2 beer ban in Washington Park. Washington Park has challenges that go way beyond whether or not someone is drinking 3-2 beer.
David.
Democratic Senate President Morgan Carroll and Republican State Senator Greg Brophy, who teamed up and unanimously got through the state Senate a referendum to add electronic data privacy protection to our state constitution. Unfortunately, their proposal was killed 6-4 in the House Judiciary Committee.
Mike.
That was a great combination. I'm going to go with NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and for being so strong in dealing with the Donald Sterling issue and the strange fact that in America in 2014 we still look to the sports world to find progressive action on racism.
Natasha.
There's a lot going on this weekend. Derby party, Cinco de Mayo celebrations, a little bit early, but what the heck, why not? But if you have any time on Saturday morning in City Park, the MS Walk is happening. It's a great way to raise awareness of a disease that affects so many, including myself, and it's an important way to raise funds for research.
And if you haven't read Natasha's essay she just put out with the most recent issue of 5280, definitely check it out. It's absolutely amazing. That's all the time we have tonight. Thanks for tuning in. We started something pretty special this week. We tape the show every Friday at 12:15, and now you can watch it live at cpt12.org. That's right, we're live streaming CIO every Friday at 12:15, so spend part of your lunch hour with us. For our viewers watching our live stream right now, stay tuned for a special behind-the-scenes segment right after our credits. And for our broadcast viewers, we will see you next week. For everyone here at Channel 12, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.